Snow drifted down in long, soundless sheets, turning the mountain into a world of white hush. Pines stood heavy-limbed beneath the weight of it, branches bowed like old men listening. The cabin sat alone on the slope, smoke lifting straight from its chimney, the only sign of life for miles. Inside, Jonas Callahan moved with the quiet certainty of a man who had learned to trust silence more than words. He fed the fire a split log, nudged it into place with the toe of his boot, and straightened. The room smelled of pine resin and smoke, of leather and cold iron. Everything in the cabin sat exactly where he'd left it, table scarred but clean, chair tucked in, rifle resting where his hand could find it even in the dark. That order steadied him. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Not the frantic crunch of someone lost, not the cautious pause of a traveler unsure. These steps were slow, deliberate, closing the distance with no apology. Jonas went still. The door opened before he reached it. Cold rushed in first, sharp as a blade. Snow swirled across the threshold, and then she stepped inside, bringing the storm with her. She was tall and broad-shouldered beneath a thick wool coat, her body full and commanding in a way that did not ask permission. Snow clung to the dark fabric, melting against the warmth of the room. Her skin was deep and luminous, a rich brown that caught the firelight like polished wood. A hood framed her face, but not enough to hide her eyes, dark, steady, unflinching. She took in the cabin in one sweep, the fire, the bed behind the curtain, him. "So," she said, voice low and even, as though they were meeting over a table instead of alone on a mountain. "This is where men go when they're done explaining themselves." Jonas shut the door behind her. The latch slid home with a final sound that settled deep in the room. "Yes," he said, "and now you're here." She lowered her hood and shrugged off her coat, slow enough that Jonas felt each second pass. Beneath it, her dress clung where it pleased, hips wide and unapologetic, chest full, her body carrying strength as much as softness. She stood rooted, as if she belonged to the ground itself. "I don't wander, I arrive." Jonas watched her without disguise. Years alone had stripped him of polite pretense. He did not leer, he assessed, weight, balance, presence, and beneath it all, something else, an awareness that this woman altered the room simply by standing in it. "What's your business here?" he asked. She met his gaze without flinching. "Shelter, for now. And after?" Her mouth curved, not quite a smile. "It depends." Jonas stepped closer. He moved like the mountain itself, slow, inevitable, every step shrinking the space between them until she could feel his heat through the air. "Hush now," he said, voice low, controlled, meant for her alone. "Save your breath." Her lashes fluttered once before she caught herself. "You order strangers often?" "Only when they're listening." She laughed, surprised, the sound warm and brief. It did not break the tension, it deepened it. "And what do you think I'm listening for?" He leaned in, close enough that his beard brushed her cheek, close enough that she could feel his steadiness. "For what comes next," he said. Her breath hitched despite herself. "You're bold," she murmured. "No, I'm honest." He let his hand drop then, settling at her waist. The contact was firm, certain, fitting. His palm spanned curve and heat, grounding rather than claiming. She did not pull away. The silence thickened. She placed her hands on his chest, not pushing, not yielding, feeling, measuring the strength beneath rough wool and scarred skin. "You don't handle gently," she replied. "I handle carefully. There's a difference." Their eyes locked. Something unspoken passed between them, heavy and undeniable. He leaned down and kissed her. It was slow, deliberate. No force, no hunger yet, only intent. Her lips were warm, full, answering before her mind could intervene. A soft sound escaped her, quiet but telling. Jonas pulled back just enough to speak. There, that sound, save it. Her eyes darkened, heat flaring there. "Your trouble," she murmured. His mouth curved faintly. "Always have been." Outside, the storm deepened, sealing the mountain away from the rest of the world. Inside the cabin, something far more dangerous than snow had already begun to fall. Silent, heavy, impossible to ignore. Morning arrived without announcement, the way it always did on the mountain. Light seeping in slow and pale, easing its way through frost-clouded glass and settling across rough-hewn walls. The storm had not broken, but it had quieted, snow lying thick and muffling the world into stillness. Jonas Callahan woke before the fire did. Habit pulled him from sleep, but awareness kept him still. She lay on the far side of the cabin, near the table, wrapped in her coat, boots lined neatly beneath the bench. She had not assumed the bed. That choice struck him harder than he expected. In the gray light, her presence felt deliberate rather than demanding, as if she had drawn her own boundary and dared the world to respect it. He rose without sound and fed the stove. Flame caught, small at first, then steadier. The crackle filled the room like breath returning to a body. She stirred. Not startled, not hurried. Her eyes opened, dark and assessing, even through sleep's last veil. She sat up slowly, stretching shoulders stiff from travel, and watched him the way a woman watched a man she did not yet trust, but intended to understand. "You always wake the fire before yourself?" she asked. Jonas glanced at her. "Keeps things from freezing." Her mouth curved faintly. "Practical." "Yes." She stood, unhurried, smoothing her dress. In daylight, her presence was even more pronounced. Full hips, strong thighs, a body shaped by survival rather than ornament. She moved with an ease that suggested she was accustomed to taking up space and defending it. She walked to the window, peering out at the white-laden trees. "Storm still holding." "For now." She nodded. "Means I'll stay another day." Jonas did not respond immediately. He poured water into the kettle, set it to heat. "You speak as if it's already decided," he said. She turned, meeting his gaze. "Isn't it?" The question lingered between them, neither challenge nor plea. Jonas studied her, weighing more than words. In her stance, he saw no desperation, only intent. "You can stay," he said finally, "as long as you respect the place." She smiled, this time openly. "I respect what earns it." They worked in parallel without discussion. Jonas sliced bread, set out dried meat. She brewed coffee, shifting the tin closer to her side of the table with quiet confidence. He noticed, said nothing. They ate in silence, but it was not empty. It carried awareness, each movement registered. When she reached for the cup, Jonas noted the steadiness of her hand. When he tore bread, she watched the strength in his fingers. "You live alone," she said eventually. "Yes." "For long?" "Long enough." She considered that. "You don't strike me as lonely." "I didn't say I was." She smiled at that, a knowing glint in her eyes. Men often mistake quiet for contentment. Jonas leaned back slightly. "And women?" "We mistake endurance for safety." The words settled deep, heavier than their tone suggested. After breakfast, Jonas pulled on his coat. "I need to check the traps." She nodded. "I'll tidy." He paused at the door. "You don't have to." She met his eyes evenly. "I choose to." Outside, the cold bit sharp. Jonas moved through snow with practiced ease, but his mind did not stay with the traps. It lingered on the woman in his cabin, the way she spoke, the way she had not claimed more than offered, the way her presence pressed against old habits without shattering them. When he returned, the cabin smelled different, warmer. Coffee lingered. The table had been wiped clean. A cloth, plain but soft, had been laid beneath the tin plates. It was a small thing. It felt like an intrusion, and like relief. She stood by the hearth, sleeves rolled, stirring something in a pot. "You moved the cloth." She didn't look up. "It keeps splinters out of the bread." He watched her for a long moment. "You don't ask permission." She replied, "I ask for relevance. If you object, say so." Jonas considered the table, then her. "Leave it." She nodded once. No triumph, no apology. Later, as dusk crept early across the mountain, the storm deepened again. Wind pressed hard against the walls, snow hissing like whispers. She sat near the fire, hands folded, gaze distant. "What brings you this far up?" Jonas asked. She did not answer at once. "Running," she said finally. "Not from danger, from noise." Jonas nodded. "Noise follows people." "Yes," she said, "but sometimes it loses interest when you stop answering." Their eyes met. In that look was recognition, two lives shaped by withdrawal, by choosing distance as defense. The fire burned lower. Shadows stretched. She rose and stood close, close enough that he felt her heat again, not touching, waiting. "You told me to hush. This morning, I don't think you want me to." Jonas's breath slowed. "I want you to choose." Her gaze held his, steady and unafraid. "I am," she said. Outside, the storm howled louder. Inside, the mountain cabin held two people who had not yet crossed every line, but stood close enough to feel the pull of what waited beyond. By the third day, the storm had settled into the mountain as if it meant to stay. Snow packed itself against the cabin walls, burying the lower windows and forcing the world into a narrow frame of white and gray. The wind no longer screamed, it prowled, low and persistent, circling the logs like something patient and hungry. Inside, the cabin had changed. Not in ways that announced themselves loudly. No grand rearrangements, no arguments, just small shifts that accumulated weight. A cloth now covered half the table. The kettle sat closer to the fire. A second cup rested beside the first without comment. Jonas noticed everything. He said very little. He worked through the morning, splitting wood near the porch, muscles moving on instinct, breath steady in the cold air. Each strike of the axe sent a dull echo into the trees. With every swing, he felt her presence behind him, not physically, but like a gaze that lingered even when unseen. When he came back inside, snow clinging to his coat, she was kneeling by the hearth, coaxing flame from stubborn embers. Her sleeves were pushed up, her hands sure and capable, ash smudged faintly at her wrist. "You don't rush fire," she said, without turning. "It remembers." Jonas shut the door. "So do people." She glanced back at him then, eyes sharp with interest. "Is that a warning?" "No. An observation." She rose slowly, brushing her hands together. The movement drew his eye, hips full, posture steady, no attempt to shrink herself for the space she occupied. She met him halfway across the room, stopping just short of contact. "You watch like a man expecting trouble." "I prepare for it," Jonas replied. Her mouth curved slightly. "That explains the walls." He did not deny it. They ate midday meal in near silence, the kind that did not itch. Outside, snow fell thicker, and the cabin felt smaller for it. Not cramped, contained. Afterward, she gathered scraps of cloth from her bag and began stitching by the window, needle flashing in and out with practiced ease. Jonas sat near the fire, sharpening his knife, the steady rasp marking time. At length she spoke again. "You never asked why I came." Jonas kept his eyes on the blade. "You said you were running." That's what I said, not why. He waited. She set the needle aside. Because when a woman like me stands still too long, people decide they own her story. Jonas's hand paused. They speak, she continued, voice calm but edged with something deeper. They label, they reduce. I got tired of correcting them. He looked up then, gray eyes steady. You don't look reduced. No, she said, but I've been treated that way. The fire popped sharply. Jonas rose, closing the distance between them until the space felt charged again. I don't reduce people. I measure them by what they carry. Her gaze searched his face. And what do I carry? He lifted his hand, slow, deliberate, and rested it over her forearm. The contact was firm, grounding, no question in it. Wait and will. Her breath caught, just a little. You speak like you already know me, she murmured. I know strength when I see it. She swallowed, eyes darkening. Strength that's lonely. Jonas's thumb shifted, barely, a subtle acknowledgement. Only when it stands alone. The room felt warmer then, though the fire had not changed. She stepped closer, close enough that her body brushed his chest. This time she did not pretend it was accidental. You told me to choose, she said quietly. I am choosing. Jonas's jaw tightened, not in resistance, but restraint. Say it. I'm staying, not because I'm trapped, because I want to. The truth of it struck him harder than he expected. He leaned down, stopping just short of her mouth, breath warming her skin. Hush, he said softly. Not yet. Her lips parted in a silent exhale. You enjoy this. I enjoy certainty, and you are close to it. She laughed under her breath, then sobered, lifting her hand to his chest, fingers splayed over his heart. You're dangerous, she said. Jonas covered her hand with his own. So are you. They stood there, neither yielding, neither advancing too far. The tension between them felt like a drawn bow. At last, he stepped back. Not retreat, control. She watched him, eyes narrowed, something like respect flickering there. That night, the wind rose again, rattling the cabin hard enough to wake old joints and memories. Jonas lay on his blanket near the fire. She slept on the bench, wrapped in wool, her back to the wall. Sleep did not come easily to either of them. In the dark, her voice broke the quiet. You don't ask my name. Jonas stared up at the beams, not until it's offered. A pause. Amara, she said. The name settled into the cabin like a final piece fitting into place. He said it once, low, certain. Yes, she whispered. That's it. Silence followed, but it was no longer empty.
Night pressed down hard on the mountain, deepening the storm's hold. Snow stacked against the cabin walls, sealing every seam, while the wind worried the logs like a restless animal. Inside, firelight pulsed slow and red, casting long shadows that stretched and shifted with every breath drawn within the room. Jonas sat on the edge of the bed, elbows braced on his thighs, head bowed slightly. The posture was not one of defeat, but of restraint. A man holding himself still when instinct urged movement. Across the cabin, Amara stood near the table, the day's quiet changes gathered around her. The cloth she had stitched now folded neatly, the kettle cooling, her coat hung by the door as if it had always belonged there. She watched him without speaking. In the fire's glow, he looked different, less like a mountain, more like the man shaped by it. Broad shoulders marked by scars, hands heavy with strength earned the hard way. There was nothing careless in him. Everything about Jonas Callahan suggested weight, of silence, of memory, of decisions not taken lightly. You're thinking again, Amara said, at last. Jonas lifted his head. So are you. She crossed the space between them slowly, stopping just out of reach. I'm thinking about what happens when the storm breaks. And, he asked, and whether we pretend this was only weather or something else. Jonas stood. The movement brought him level with her, his presence filling the room without effort. He did not touch her yet. He studied her face, the steadiness of her gaze, the quiet challenge there, the vulnerability she did not hide behind softness. This isn't weather, he said. No, she agreed. It's choice. She took one step closer, close enough now that the heat of him brushed her skin, close enough that her breath shifted. I've lived in places where I was tolerated, where my body, my voice, my wanting took up too much room. I won't do that again. Jonas's hand lifted, hovering between them. You don't take up too much space, he said. You fill it. Something in her expression broke open then, not weakness, but release. She nodded once, as if accepting a truth she had not realized she had been waiting to hear. She reached for him this time, resting her palm against his chest. The contact was grounding, deliberate. Jonas covered her hand with his own, larger, rougher, holding without pinning. You still haven't told me to hush, she murmured. His mouth curved faintly. I want to hear you. She laughed softly, a sound warmed by trust rather than challenge. Then her voice lowered again. And if I speak too much? Jonas leaned in, stopping just short of her lips. Then I'll remind you where to spend it. Her breath stuttered, unmistakable. The kiss came slower than before. No urgency drove it. No test remained. It was an agreement made without words, deepening as her hands slid up his arms, as his settled at her back, broad palms spanning her fully, holding her like something chosen. She sighed into him, a sound that might have become more if he had not broken the kiss gently, his forehead resting against hers. Hush, he said softly. Not yet. Her eyes fluttered open, dark and bright with understanding. You're careful, she said. With what matters, he replied. They moved together toward the bed without haste, steps uncounted, bodies aligned by instinct rather than urgency. Jonas sat first, drawing her down beside him, not claiming, not rushing. She leaned into his side, her head resting against his shoulder, her weight easy and unguarded. Outside, the storm roared louder, but inside the cabin, the world narrowed to firelight and breath. You don't scare me, Amara said after a while. Jonas's arm curved around her, firm and steady. You don't scare me either. That's not what I meant, she said. She shifted, turning to face him. I make you feel seen. That's rarer. He met her gaze fully then. I don't look away. The truth of it settled between them, heavy and certain. They lay back together beneath the quilts, bodies close but unhurried, the heat between them building without demand. Jonas wrapped an arm around her middle, anchoring her there. She rested against him, listening to the slow, steady beat of his heart. In that rhythm she found calm. In her nearness he found something he had not known he was missing. The fire burned lower, wind clawed at the roof. Neither noticed. For the first time since the storm began, the mountain felt less like a barrier and more like a shelter, holding two people who had chosen, deliberately and without retreat, not to stand alone.
Dawn came quietly, as if the mountain itself had learned restraint. The storm had loosened its grip sometime in the night. Snow still lay deep, smoothing the world into clean lines and pale light, but the wind had gone still. The cabin breathed differently now, no longer a place braced against attack, but one resting after endurance. Jonas woke to warmth. Not only the fire, banked low and steady, but the weight against his chest, the solid living presence that rose and fell with calm breath. Amara lay turned toward him, one arm resting across his ribs, her cheek pressed against the worn wool of his shirt. In sleep, She did not hold herself tight. There was no vigilance in her posture, no readiness to retreat. That, more than anything, unsettled him. He stayed still, afraid to disturb what felt newly earned. The pale morning light traced her face, strong jaw softened by rest, lashes dark against her skin, mouth relaxed and unguarded. This was not the woman who had arrived with snow in her hair and steel in her spine. This was the same woman, yes, but eased, anchored, choosing to be here. Her breath shifted. She stirred. Jonas felt it before he saw it, the change in rhythm, the return of awareness. Her eyes opened slowly, focus sharpening as she took him in. For a long moment, she only looked at him. "You're watching again," she said softly. He did not deny it. "You're still here." Her mouth curved into a small, knowing smile. "So are you." She shifted closer, fitting herself more fully against him without asking, her hand sliding to his chest, fingers splayed over his heart. Jonas's arm tightened around her middle in answer, firm and certain. Outside, the mountain lay hushed beneath snow. Inside, the cabin held something steady. "I thought," Amara said after a moment, "that staying anywhere long enough meant giving up pieces of yourself." Jonas brushed his thumb along her arm, slow and grounding. "And now?" "And now I think it means deciding which pieces to lay down and which to keep." He considered her words. "I won't take what you're not ready to give." Her gaze lifted to his, searching. "And if I give it freely? Then I'll hold it, not waste it." She nodded once, accepting that promise for what it was, plain, unembellished, meant to be kept. They rose together when the fire needed tending. Jonas split kindling while Amara set water to boil. Their movements overlapped easily, unspoken coordination settling in like habit. When he reached for the coffee tin and found it moved again, he paused. She watched him, amused. "You noticed?" "Yes." "Good. Means you're adapting." He gave a low sound that might have been a laugh. "Don't get ahead of yourself." She smiled, unbothered. "I don't rush mountains." They ate by the window, steam rising from their cups as sunlight caught on snow-laden branches. The world beyond the glass felt distant, smaller somehow, while the cabin felt full. After, Jonas pulled on his coat. "I need to clear the trail, make sure we're not buried in." Amara wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and followed him onto the porch. The cold bit sharp, but Jonas stood close, blocking the wind without thinking. She leaned into him easily, as if it were already natural. She looked out over the valley, white and endless. "You ever think about leaving this place?" Jonas considered the question carefully. "I did," he said, "before." "And now?" He turned to her. "Now I think about who stands here with me." Her hand slid into his, fingers warm against the cold. She squeezed once, a quiet answer. When they turned back inside, the fire crackled higher, the cabin settling into its familiar rhythm. Amara paused near the hearth, studying him with an expression that held both warmth and intent. "You told me to hush," she said softly, "from the moment I arrived." "Yes." She stepped closer, close enough that her voice dropped. "You can stop now." Jonas searched her face, found no uncertainty there, only choice. "I will," he said, "when you ask me to." Her lips parted in a slow breath. "Then don't hush me yet." He leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. "All right." The kiss that followed was unhurried, deeper than before, carrying no test and no restraint. When they parted, her breath came slower,
fuller, spent where it belonged. She smiled. That's better. Jonas's mouth curved in answer. You learn fast. So do you, she said. Outside, the mountain stood quiet, winter held at bay by light and patience. Inside the cabin, something lasting had taken root, not born of storm or shelter alone, but of two people who had chosen, deliberately, to remain. And this time, neither of them was running.